Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Emma. Please consider subscribing and giving the video a thumbs up if you enjoy this kind of content, because it really helps grow and support the channel. So over the last month, I've been sharing a lot of short form videos about debt, financial stress, payday habits, emergency funds, and building a calmer approach to life and money. And honestly, one thing I keep realising is that most people aren't bad with money. They're just stuck in a stressful situation with bad systems and bad habits that keep them constantly reacting instead of feeling in control. Because financial stress affects everything: your confidence, your health, your relationships, your ability to think long term, and more importantly, your peace. And that is why I've put together this video, because financial freedom usually isn't built through these dramatic, big habits that happen overnight. A lot of the time, it starts with smaller things: better habits, calmer systems, more awarenesses, and learning how to stop making decisions from survival mode. So in this video, I wanted to bring some of the biggest mindset shifts, reminders, and lessons from this month put together in one place. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. So before you take on any debt, ask yourself this: does this increase my income, my skills, or my assets? And does this help me create more options or fewer options? Because most people skip these questions. And if you want to learn and understand the full framework, it's in this week's podcast. Most people think an emergency fund is about saving for disasters, but it's not. It's about creating breathing room in your life, because when things go wrong, and they will, they always do, it's not usually one big crisis. It's a few small things all at once. And without a buffer, that is when stress kicks in. So here's 3 simple tips to build an emergency fund that actually works. The first one: start smaller. It's easier than you think. You don't need months of expenses saved straight away. Start with £50, £100, if possible £1,000, because that builds momentum first, because consistency is what matters more than perfection. The second tip: you have to keep it separate, because your emergency fund should not sit with your everyday money. You need to keep it out of sight, without temptation, because that is how you protect that money. The third tip is use it for emergencies, not convenience, because an emergency is something that's unexpected, necessary, and time sensitive, not a holiday, not upgrades. So that's why you need to protect the money with purpose, because this isn't about being perfect with money, but it's about creating a system that reduces stress, reduces pressure, and gives you options. And this is where everything starts, because if you want to build this properly, you need to understand how it fits into the bigger system. And if you want to learn more about the bigger system, listen to the full podcast, listen to the show. Most people think wealth means more money, but the older I get, the more I realise the richest parts of life never hit your bank account, like good wealth, energy, peace of mind, time, deep and meaningful relationships, and most of all, a calm nervous system. And I ignored all of that while chasing success. The more burnt out I became, the less wealthy I started to feel, because what's the point in actually building a life you're too exhausted to enjoy? The wealth I'd been ignoring was the stuff money was supposed to protect, all in the first place. And I talk about this in depth, and how I realised I've been focusing on the wrong type of wealth and what it ended up costing me. And that is in the full YouTube video below. Most people know their salary, but very few people know their freedom number. The amount of money required for work to become optional, because financial freedom isn't about becoming rich. It's just about removing pressure. And once you know your number, you stop chasing it randomly. And if you want to understand how to calculate your financial freedom number and why it changes everything, listen to the full podcast episode on Live Full, Retire Early, the podcast, which is linked below. Most people spend their entire lives chasing more money without ever defining what more money actually means. And that's dangerous, because if you don't define what enough is, the system will define it for you and it will never stop moving. And if this kind of thing resonates, the full conversation is now live on the Live Full, Retire Early podcast, which is linked below. Your financial freedom number is not a Lamborghini, it's not a mansion in the country, and it's not unlimited money. It's simply your annual living expenses times 25. And that's it. That's the number that turns freedom from a fantasy into a target. And I break down this properly in the full podcast episode. So if you want to calculate your financial freedom number, go listen to the podcast, which is linked below. One of the most powerful things I ever did for myself financially was stop asking myself, how can I get rich? And I started asking myself, how much of money do I actually need to feel free? Because those two questions are very different with two very different answers. One creates endless chasing, while the other creates clarity. And that question completely changed everything how I saw work, stress, and freedom. Why is nobody talking about this? But a lot of people don't actually want to retire early. What they really want is the ability to breathe, to stop feeling trapped, to stop panicking about money, and to stop tolerating things purely because they need the payslip. And that's why I think your financial freedom number matters so much, because once you know it, it gives you options, and options change everything. And I break this down properly in the full podcast episode of Live Full, Retire Early. So go listen if you want to calculate your own number. The real flex isn't looking rich. It's feeling calm. It's sleeping properly. It's having breathing room and not panicking every time an unexpected expense appears. It's being able to make decisions from clarity instead of survival mode. Because how many people are performing wealth publicly while privately feeling financially fragile? And that's why I care about the systems so much, because calm is underrated, but calm changes everything. One of the most exhausting forms of burnout is financial stress. And the scary part is how normalised it's all become. People are walking around carrying constant anxiety in the background. Bills, debt, unexpected expenses, whether they're falling behind. Because that pressure follows you everywhere. In your sleep, in your relationships, in your energy, and most of all, in your health. Which is why I believe a calm cash flow system matters so much more than money. It's about creating a life that's sustainable. And if you're tired of constantly feeling financially overwhelmed, go listen to the Calm Cash Flow podcast episode on Live Full, Retire Early, where I break down the full framework, which is linked below. The biggest wealth killer isn't always money problems. Sometimes it's burnout, stress, exhaustion, and a nervous system running on empty. Health is wealth, but not in a motivational quote kind of way, but in a literal way, because your energy affects your decisions, your stress affects your relationships, your nervous system affects your focus, your sleep affects your emotional resilience, and your body, it affects everything. So you are the asset, and the entire quality of your life runs through your physical and mental state. Yet so many people treat their health like an afterthought until something forces their attention. And I nearly did the same. And that experience changed the way I think about success, stress, and health, and the way we live our lives. Have you ever been paid and somehow wondered where all your money went? Yeah, most people have experienced that cycle too. And usually it's not because they're irresponsible, it's because nothing has a job. When your money sits all together, everything starts competing. Bills, coffee, subscriptions, random spending, impulse purchases, and your future goals. And eventually, it just disappears into the background. And that's why I believe every pound, every dollar needs a purpose. Not to restrict your life, but to create clarity. Because it reduces stress. It reduces stress around money, what quietly affects everything. And if you're tired of feeling financially overwhelmed all the time, go listen to the Calm Cashflow podcast episode where I break down the whole framework. One mindset shift that changed my finances forever was I stopped running my personal finances emotionally and started running them like a business. Because businesses don't just throw all their money into one giant account and hope for the best. They allocate, they plan, they separate things properly. So I started doing the same. I created different buckets for things like operations, building wealth, enjoying life, and protecting myself financially. And then guess what happened? Suddenly, everything felt clearer. Less guilt, less chaos, less overthinking. Because when your money has a structure, your mind gets more peace too. And if you're tired of feeling financially overwhelmed all the time, go listen to the full podcast episode on the Calm Cashflow system. Most people don't actually have a money problem. What they actually have is a money chaos problem. Because a lot of people are earning decent money, but still feel constantly stressed. Money's coming in, money's going out, but everything sits in one account. There's no structure, no system, and definitely no clarity. And over time, that creates mental exhaustion. You start avoiding your banking app, avoiding conversations about money, and avoiding looking too closely at where things are actually going. But calm with money usually doesn't come from earning more first. It comes from creating a system your nervous system can actually handle. And that's why I created the Calm Cashflow system. Because money should support your life, not constantly overwhelm it. And if you're tired of feeling financially overwhelmed all the time, go listen to the full podcast episode on the Calm Cashflow system on Live Full, Retire Early, the podcast, where I break down the whole framework properly down there, which is linked below. I used to work with a man in his 60s, and you could always tell when it was payday, because suddenly there were snacks, takeaways, and little treats showing up at the office every day. So if you didn't know when payday actually was, you'd know by how he spent. Because a few days later, he was completely skint again. And honestly, that pattern has stuck with me over the years. Because I don't think it was greed. I think payday was the only time he felt temporary relief from the pressures of life. But that's when I realised a lot of people don't use payday to build stability. They use it to emotionally recover.